When I first saw the addition of a new ultimate skill, Soulrift, along with its new unique helmet, the Unmaker, the gears in my head started to get to turning, and I'm very happy to report that my initial theory craft before the PTR came out was pretty spot on for how you're going to build this thing. Welcome to what is ultimately going to be the Soulrift Necromancer. Now there's a lot of different mechanics that are going to need to be understood for you to like fully grok what's going on here. I'm going to give the TLDR really quickly. Later on I'll have a mechanics section. Use the timestamps down below for whatever part you want to particularly look at. Similarly, I'll have a D4 planner down below so you can look at the gear and all the stuff that I'm generally recommending. It's going to look different than what's in this current video because the video is what I currently have and the planner will be the ideal. That's always the case, but I always get questions on it, and I just want to go ahead and point that back out. Hey, sometimes I don't have the items that I would ultimately recommend for you to have the best time with. But what you need to understand about how the build works is that Soulrift is a new ult, does shadow damage over time, generates barrier, generates essence, gives you a damage bonus. Cool, that's great. We don't care about basically any of the damage that it would normally do. We're proccing it all through the Unmaker. The Unmaker takes that damage over time and allows it to be an instance of damage. It's going to multiply it by 200%, and on top of that, it's going to allow it to do things like overpower as well as crit. The thing that you need to figure out how to do, though, is empower Unmaker in the first place, because it has a special little caveat. It's only going to trigger this proc of Soulrift, we're just going to call it the proc moving forward, whenever you generate 30 essence. And when I say generate essence, I mean actually gain a total of 30 essence or more. You can't be at full essence and gain essence. No, you have to be at somewhere below your maximum essence and gain a minimum of 30. To be able to figure that out, you kind of have to come up with a way for it to really work together. And what is the best way to both spend and generate essence? Well, that's going to be Bone Spirit. You'll see that on our bar we have Bone Spirit. Is Bone Spirit doing damage? No. Unmaker and Soulrift are. Stay with me here. Bone Spirit's entire purpose is to drain the entirety of your essence globe. And then through tempers that say whenever you cast a macabre skill, which is what Bone Spirit is, you're going to gain a ton of essence back. Add on to that lucky hit chance to be able to restore essence, a couple different options like Shattered Spirit in the earlier game, and what you get are very effective and efficient engine for being able to both spend and generate essence. This is going to proc Unmaker anywhere between 2 to 8 times per cast of Bone Spirit, depending on how lucky you get. The more maximum essence you have, the greater the total ability to be able to restore that essence, meaning the more procs per times that you cast the skill itself. So to be able to empower that, we're going to come up with a lot of ways of scaling critical strike damage, scaling shadow damage, and we're going to make Bone Spirit have 0 cooldown and cast it as fast as possible. But what you're looking at right now is a Pit 80 clear. Now Pit 80 isn't going to be the most impressive accomplishment yet, but I would say that right now the build is operating around somewhere around 50 to 60% efficiency. My Paragon board is now very bad because I was originally attempting to scale the Bone Spirit damage, which is something that I think that you can do in a hybrid version of the build. It's just not what we ended up building into. And I'd say we fairly easily cleared through this Pit 80. We are using only a single mythic unique. We're only 4 out of 12 masterworked on the vast majority of our gear. We haven't spent all of our Paragon points yet. Paragon is not optimized, skill tree is not optimized, and we're actually like having to use skill points to get armor up to hit cap because our gear is not good enough. All of that is to say that if this was operating at 100%, I think we would be fairly competently pushing into tier 100. And with full ancestral gear, full 12/12 masterwork across the board, better GAs, this thing would be singing through that same content. The cool part about the build, and probably what I should have sold you on at the beginning, is the fact that it both does single target damage very well as AoE damage. There's kind of no difference here. You do the same amount of damage regardless of number of targets within the area, so it doesn't suffer like things like Blood Surge. And on top of that, it's a really easy build to pilot. Yes, you need to hit your ultimate when it's off cooldown. You got to make sure that you cast Corp Tendrils to be able to bunch everything up if you want to be efficient. But basically, by the end of it, you just hold down Bone Spirit. If you want to get a little sweaty and weave in some corpse explosions to be able to get Flesh Eater up, obviously your damage will be better. But realistically, if all you did was cast your ult and cast Bone Spirit whenever they're off of cooldown, you'd be doing just fine. But now that you've seen the build in play, let's go ahead and look at all the things that we normally do. The aspects, the gear, the Book of the Dead, etc., to again, give you an idea of what you should be expecting in the planner. And I can't stress it enough again, the planner will be different because the planner will be ideal, because the planner is what you should strive for. What I have right now is nowhere near ideal. Heck, the Unmaker helmet that I'm wearing is item power 633. It's not even max for a level before Ancestral. So the gear I'm going to have is a long ways away from what ideal looks like. So now we understand all of that, let's go ahead and we'll just like go through the gear and aspects, skill tree in the Paragon, and then I'll do mechanics at the end for people who want to see that, but are, you know, not necessarily interested in it. I'm not going to bog you down with it. Obviously, everything revolves around the Unmaker. You can both increase its duration by spending essence, and then you get the damage proc by generating essence. So I'll just go ahead and show you that. Soulrift is going to be on the field. I cast Bone Spirit, and that big shadow explosion that you see, that's the Unmaker. The mythic unique that we're going to end up using is going to be Ethereals. It's an insane amount of damage reduction and helps to solve for maximum resistances, so that armor is a bit easier to handle with the rest of what you have going on. Ethereals just comes along with a ton of DR, that's always great, but the first rune word that we're going to use is called Voracious Call. This is a combination of when you spend essence, evoke the enhanced Warcry. Oddly enough, the thing that says give movement speed to the Necromancer, give them a damage bonus, and then also make them berserking, gaining an additional damage bonus, is really, really good. And since this requires you to spend a ton of maximum essence, it's actually better than the cast a core skill, very slightly, as long as you are over 100 maximum essence, since Bone Spirit eats all of it on every single cast. For the gloves, again, I was initially looking to actually scale Bone Spirit damage, but realistically what you need is critical strike chance, attack speed. You would also want lucky hit chance to be able to restore essence here. And then you want to temper on ultimate damage as well as soul rift duration. We're going to put grasping veins here. The critical strike chance helps to be able to offset Soulrift not being a bone skill, so it's a little bit harder to scale its crit chance. For the pants, intelligence, maximum life, we're going to try to solve our armor here, so an armor temper as well as an armor roll, more Soulrift duration, and then we're going to be putting in our second rune word. This is going to be pugilistic. Pugilistic says cast a skill with a cooldown, which both Bone Spirit has a cooldown, and Soulrift has a cooldown, and Blood Mist has a cooldown, and Corpse Tendrils has a cooldown, so it's very easy to proc this, and then this will cast Druid's Petrify. Petrify is how we're staggering bosses. It's an insane amount of stagger on a boss, and on top of that, whenever you successfully petrify monsters, it's just an insane critical strike damage multiplier as well. You're going to basically be seeing this combination on every single build that doesn't need some kind of niche joke style or meme or like very specific setup for rune words, so get used to it. Until they nerf these things, you're going to see it on everything. For the boots, there's a couple different things you can do here. Movement speed's obviously super important, maximum life and intelligence. Essence per second will help a little bit here. I don't think that's really going to break the bank, but it's definitely going to feel a lot better if your gear is worse than what my current gear is when you're trying this out in the season, or if you tried in the PTR yourself. More movement speed, another temper of soul rift duration. Here's where we're putting cursed aura, so we never really have to cast. I'm currently using a two-handed axe. I think that ultimately you'll end up using a one-handed sword and a one-handed focus. I did the math, and even though the damage is higher on the axe, the total gain in efficiency is going to beat out the higher damage of this weapon by about like 10 to 15%. It really depends on where all the different breakpoints end up. But we want intelligence, maximum life, and then lucky hit chance to be able to restore your primary resource. It turns out, if you have Soul Rift going the whole time and Bone Spirit hitting every single monster within range, you're going to be proccing this a lot, and every single time that you fully fill up your essence, you're going to proc Unmaker that many times. So for me right now, I would proc it 4 times just from triggering that thing once per cast. We're going to want ultimate skill damage. We're going to want chance for Soul Rift to deal double damage. At the end of the day, you would want to triple master or crit that, so it has a 100% chance of that triggering. And then here's where we're putting Damned. On the one-hander and the offhand, you're going to see Damned and probably like Accelerating or Great Feast. I'm not exactly sure where I'll land on it. But right now, on the two-handed version, this is the biggest damage multi we can get. Also, quick note, we have 100% crit chance. So Emeralds outperform Diamonds on a build whose purpose is to scale ultimate damage. Some feedback that I give to Blizzard, ultimate skill damage gem should probably be the highest additive available inside of the options, because it's the most niche thing that you would do. Maybe that's just me. I think it's kind of lame that the crit damage gems outperform ultimate damage gems on an ultimate damage skill build. My amulet is Trash City. Now that being said, you will need a roll of cooldown reduction somewhere, along with rapid ossification on our temper to be able to permanently cast Bone Spirit without any cooldown. So here, ultimately, we would want cooldown reduction. Then we would also want to get Gloom ranks here, and then either critical strike chance if you need that, or intelligence just for a big damage boost, as well as making resistances easier to cap before you have Tyraels. Here's where we're going to be putting at least 1 roll of either rapid ossification and then 2 rolls of cast Macabre gain essence. So it doesn't matter which one you get it on, you just need 2 of the second one and 1 of that first one. Here's where I'm currently putting sacrificial. Now, Sacrificial won't be on the amulet in the planner, it's just that I currently need Sacrificial there to hit 100% crit chance. If I had a better GA or better Masterwork crits, or had worked the majority of my items up to 12 out of 12, I probably wouldn't need that anymore, but I was trying to get a much more realistic understanding of what the build looked like, even in high pit tier, so that I could properly recommend and work out all the kinks of what it would need at certain progression points. To that point, on the rings, intelligence, attack speed, critical strike chance, we want, again, more ultimate damage and the cast Macabre to generate essence. Here's where I currently have accelerating. Accelerating feels really good. Never forget that Bone Spirit is a core skill, so we are going to crit with that all the time. It has a 100% crit chance, so we just have a permanent 30% increase in attack speed. Oddly enough, more attack speed means more triggers, since the faster we cast Bone Spirit, the faster we generate essence. For the second ring, we basically want the exact same thing here. Again, one roll of rapid ossification. You also have to Masterwork crit it one time to get up to +3 ranks for this to work in the way that it's meant to. Here's where I currently have Great Feast. Great Feast is also just another really good option, not just for the damage. The damage is great, but every single time that it loses you essence, you can then regain that essence, and it will often help you to be below max essence if, in case like you were to trigger the lucky hit to be able to restore essence multiple times, it will very slightly increase the efficiency of the build. For the Book of the Dead, I currently need to sacrifice Skirmishers for my crit chance. Ultimately, you would want to sacrifice Reapers for a huge multiplier of shadow damage, vulnerable damage through our mages, as well as crit damage through our golem. I'm just going to touch on the heavy hitters from the skill tree. It's all going to be in the planner down below, but we don't really want to scale the Bone Spirit damage. Don't forget that. If you're ever asking like, oh, why don't you put points into Imperfectly Balanced? Because we don't care about scaling the Bone Spirit damage itself. It doesn't really add to the build. Hued Flesh to be able to generate corpses, Blood Mist to be able to get out of bad things. We obviously want more damage when we're fortified. We should be able to fortify decently well since we have good lucky hit chance. And then I currently need Spiked Armor. You won't need that. 1 point into Corpse Explosion just to be able to trigger it. We're going to go with Fueled by Death as a multi. Building down to Abhorrent Decrepified, this will help with uptime on your actual Soulrift spell itself. You even notice that like on that boss, we basically had 100% uptime, and I have very imperfect cooldown reduction on my gear. Amplify damage, Death's Embrace for survivability. Again, Iron Maiden with Enhanced Iron Maiden, just like Cursed Aura is passively generating some essence, especially in things like Helltide, as well as Infernal Horde. Obviously, we want the Shadow passives here. We're using Corpse Tendrils to generate Blood Orbs, because we're going to use that as a multiplier in Paragon. Building down into Bone Spirit with Bone Spirit generates Essence. This is another huge boost to your overall output of Unmaker procs. And then we need the 3 points into Rapid Ossification, so that 6 total ranks means that every single time that we cast it, it's immediately off cooldown. Maxing out Soulrift, obviously, we're going to be building into Standalone, Memento Mori, as well as Finality and Inspiring Leader. Lastly, we're building down into Affliction. Now you may be asking yourself, hey Mac, why not Shadow Blight? You're a damage over time build, use the big blighted aspect. What's the deal? Well, even if you assume 100% uptime of Shadow Blight, if you were to take the 55% multiplier that Blighted would get you and divide that by the 15% multiplier you naturally get from Affliction, you only need to find a 34 point something percent multiplier to be able to break out even there. So that means that if you even had like 99% uptime of Blighted, or maybe 95 or 90%, the relative strength of the aspect you would need to find to pair it with Affliction gets easier and easier and easier to eclipse the bonus. I'm sorry, y'all, we're just not using Blighted anymore. From the Paragon, and this one's gonna look like hilarious because it's absolutely not optimized. Again, check the planner, but I went with Eliminator for a huge amount of additive stats and the just big multi against elite monsters. Building up into Bone Graft originally, here's where we put Essence for a huge crit multiplier, picking up a bunch of survivability, some more maximum essence so that we're able to proc it faster and more efficiently, a little bit of bone crit chance here, then obviously Bone Graft. The good part about Bone Graft is, again, it's going to like further increase your, maximum essence pool, but the multiplier that it grants you also just works for all damage. So this is also going to work for the Unmaker shadow damage. Building up into Flesh Eater, because obviously Flesh Eater, here's where I'm putting Scourge. This is going to give you more shadow damage over time for Unmaker, a 10% multi just for everything that's going on, and then more shadow damage when it's a legendary glyph. Also picking up a huge amount of resistance here. If you do not have materials yet, you'll need this to cap. Building over into Blood Begets Blood for a huge multi while picking up Blood Orbs, a ton of maximum life here, and then this is where we're going to be putting Sacrificial. No minions, obviously, so a huge multiplier, a secondary generic multiplier, and then just some more generic damage and damage while healthy, which you should have all the time since you have Permanent Barrier. Then for the last board, we're obviously building into Frailty, because Frailty says 40% damage for basically doing nothing. This is cracked. More maximum life over here in this node, a ton of attack speed and maximum life here, and then lastly we're building into Darkness. Darkness is going to, 1, grant you shadow damage, that's great for us. 2, give us damage reduction, which is like fairly good, especially in higher tier pit, and then give us a shadow damage multiplier when it is a legendary glyph at rank 46. Inevitably, people are going to ask me, where does this fit on a tier list? Now, 1, we really don't have a full understanding what content's going to look like. We have no idea what mercenaries are going to bring to the game. We don't know what you're going to need to do in Dark Citadel. We don't know what you're going to need to do in the Undercity, etc., etc. So I'll just currently use the pit tier clearing in its current functionality and what I'm extrapolating it out to give you a rough concept of what you should expect. I think that this build ultimately falls somewhere in the B tier. I think that like Bone Spirit and Blood Wave are just like light years ahead. That's just how metas work. There's always going to be a best build. That doesn't mean that the build isn't cool, it isn't powerful, it isn't great, it isn't fun to like build into and meaningful to progress and get better gear for. If you're a hyper meta slave, I don't know what to tell you, dog, enjoy your Bone Spirit. But for people who are maybe turned off by Bone Spirit but are always generally intrigued by that power, I think that this is a great fit for you. Now here we go, let me shill for myself. If you're brand new here, subscribe to the channel. You don't want to be missing out on any of this stuff because everything we're doing in the PTR right now is going to shape what the meta is going to be looking like once the actual expansion in Season 6 goes live, so you want to be as up to date as possible. Similarly, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the content that you saw. If you don't though, if for whatever reason you didn't vibe with this, but you also made it this far, first off, thank you. But secondly, let me know down in the comments as well. Is there something I could have done better? Would you have enjoyed a different style of content? I would appreciate valuable feedback. Not just being a dick, obviously, like, hey, if you just don't like my face, you don't. But the fact that you're walking away without subscribing to the channel means that I have failed in some way, and I'd love to get you back here. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.